Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is The Take on this Thursday morning on the short week. And again, interesting how we're following up. It's been a wacky week and it was a wacky Wednesday. And so as we get into Thursday, let's look back at Wednesday just for a moment here. So we started the day off. We talked about this yesterday, a little bit of pressure on the markets. That was given some relief. The market started to move to the upside in terms of the Dow itself. Then we had that late morning sort of a dip, and we've seen that time and time again. So then we started to see that recovery in the final 3 hours of the day or so and finished up about 105 points on the day for the Dow. Now, the NASDAQ, somewhat similar path, so to speak, although it started off with a bang. It had a nice lift off in the pre-market, and as we got into the market, it also dipped, and then it kind of rallied. And by the time it rallied, it was a little bit closer to a flat to a green space. So that's something that, we've seen the NASDAQ really start to carry the markets to some degree with this week when we've seen a lot of that activity. And we've talked about the big four and some of the activity that we've seen within tech itself and some of the strength there. Tech has been decent, but we're seeing a little bit more weakness, and we'll jump into that right away. How about the semiconductors? The semiconductors and some of the pressure that's been on that particular segment. It's not its own sector necessarily, but the SMH, you take a look at that, and you see some definite pressure on that side of the market. And it's Xilinx, it was AMD, it was Micron, it was Maxim, it was a number of different names that were contributing to that push to the downside. We had volatility yesterday. I was just sort of feeling fairly comfortable right in that 16 to 17 level, finished off the day at around 1620 with some very, very strong volumes once again. Not over 40 million, but 39.4 million is not too bad. And that was a pretty strong day once again in terms of the volumes that we are seeing in the derivatives markets just continues. Apple was the leader. 3 million contracts yesterday trading in Apple. Tesla, 1 million contracts yesterday. AMC, if people think it's over with for the meme or the rebel stocks, it is not. And you can take a look at some of the volumes that are in many of those different names. AMC being one of them, of course, with 880,000 contracts yesterday as well. So there still continues to be that activity, absolutely, in some of those different areas. So yesterday, where were we really starting to see a little bit of the movement? We had materials moving to the upside. We had technology moving about 0.5% or so to the upside. We had the industrials names like 3M and Honeywell. You had Nucor, US Steel, Steel Dynamics. When you take a look over and where we were seeing some of the performance when we talk about those materials, old school tech, once again, Oracle, Apple, Microsoft, Google, all very powerful movers. That was part of the lifting process that we were seeing yesterday, definitely from technology. But it was energy. Energy had pressure on it once again. We talked about oil. We said that moved that 77 in that overnight market as we were coming into this week really looked impressive. We aren't even anywhere close to that anymore. Yesterday, oil was trading right around that 72 level. The interesting thing, we talk about big tech, take a look at Oracle. Now, we had some unusual option activity yesterday, well after the time frame of what we were doing with the take, but Oracle was very, very interesting. Stock was trading right around, it was at a very, very nice level yesterday, although not that terribly far away from highs. Well, yesterday we had a huge buyer of 15,000 of Friday's expiring 85 calls. And I'll tell you what, it was an amazingly fast move to the upside. And actually the stock jumped all the way up and hit 87. So those options that were trading for 24 cents were suddenly trading for $2. A really, really sharp, nice move. I'm going to come back to Oracle in a little while here. But first, before we do that, yeehaw. I mean, what a wild ride. And the ride continues today. The pressure on the markets. You look over at the Dow and you see the Dow down in the pre-market, 450 points, 500 points. You look over at the NASDAQ, down a couple of hundred points as well. So very, very heavy pressure on both of those major indices. You take a look at the Dow, and the Dow down about 375, down 400, down. It started to look like we were starting to improve a little bit, but the last I looked, we were down about 500 points once again. Now, the NASDAQ, on the other hand, is off of those lows. The last I looked, we were down about 175 points. Still a significant move to the downside, but well off some of the lows of the day. The lowest I saw was, I think the NASDAQ was down about 260 points very early in the day, about the first 30 minutes or thereabouts. But here we are, much improved off of that, but still nearly 200 points off. So a pretty significant move for both of those major indices. I mentioned crude now underneath 72. Every single sector was in the red at the start of the day. We had nothing really kind of moving into the positive side of things, but it was materials down 1.7%. Industrials down about 1.7%. Technology down about almost 1.5%. But it was the semiconductors again. You look over at the SMH, at least early, it was down about 2.5%. So some serious pressure being put on the semiconductors themselves, the chip stocks. We've been talking about those for a really long time. Markets seem to really like when they're seeing the chip stocks move to the upside. Seems to be a trend that the markets themselves seem to want to be a little bit higher. When we've got this kind of a pressure, we can see exactly what's going on with the markets themselves. Bitcoin, it pulled off, sure, but it's been in that range. We were talking about 33,000 to about 35,000. It did get underneath that 33,000. Last I looked, it was trading around 32,600 and that sort of a range, but very, very close. Not nearly as volatile as it was, but picking up a little bit in some of that volatility. Tell you what's really getting hit today. Freeport Mac. We talk about the materials yesterday being a strong point. Not so much today. Really, look at Freeport Mac, it was down about 6%. I look over at some of the rail stocks. Kansas City Southern, CSX, down fairly significantly. Kansas City Southern really taking it on the chin. And then you look over at some of these Chinese names. Now, the Chinese names, once again, pressure. Trip.com, Baidu, JD, Pinduoduo. I mean, it's just amazing how much pressure we are seeing as they're moving against some of these Chinese stocks. But not all of them, not every single one of them is getting slammed. As a matter of fact, we saw a little bit of activity today in NEO, but that leads me into where we are going now with some of the unusual option activity. So, number one, we got Oracle. Now, Oracle had pulled back off that 87 level, and it was trading around 86.5. I think it's dropped a little bit more since that time, but we can take a look at that. Either way, we had a buyer of 6,000 of this Friday, July 9th, tomorrow, the Friday calls, and then the 6,000 of the 87 strike calls. They were about 24 cents to 64 cents. Very similar to the dollar amounts from yesterday. Kind of makes you wonder, same trader maybe wanting to be involved to see if there's another pop today. We'll see if that actually, and actually you've got a little bit of tomorrow as well. So you've got today, tomorrow to see if this stock, once again, after hitting new highs, can it hit those highs and go through those highs? We've got 48 hours to see how that plays out. Workhorse is number two. Now, I mentioned that because NEO, Workhorse, you get into that EV space, any kind of area within the EV space, and you get to see a lot of activity. We're seeing activity not only just in NEO, which we saw earlier this morning, but Workhorse. Stock was trading right around $13, just a little bit higher than 13 bucks. 2,700 of July 9th expiring. That's tomorrow. Once again, the 13 calls. So they're going right at it. And those prices, almost identical to the Oracle prices, 24 cents. They paid all the way up to about 64 cents for those options. So again, looking at both of these two names and seeing some repeat paper coming back for Oracle, that makes it pretty interesting for me because they had a great run yesterday, looking for maybe an extended run today, and then the EV space seeing a little bit of activity as well. Folks, have a great day of trading. Hopefully you're understanding all of what we're talking about. You have to be mindful of a lot of things. Theta is one of those. Theta is time. That's one of the Greeks that goes into pricing. You've got to understand that because you've got to understand how much time you are buying. And in this case, both these two unusuals, you're not buying much time at all. But how much time are you buying? That's just one of the elements that goes into the pricing of these options. You can learn a whole lot more from the Market Rebellion crew. Do a great job. You got Stu Dorfman over there. You got Bill Johnson as well. Unbelievably great educators. Folks, have a great and safe day of trading. Understand this, discipline always. See you tomorrow.